I'm here this afternoon with John Guandolo with understandingthethreat.com, correct?
Correct.
All right. John, would you introduce yourself to my audience, your background, please?
Sure. Grew up in Maryland. I'm a 1989 graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. Served for about 7 years as an officer in the United States Marine Corps, Infantry and Reconnaissance. Served in combat in Desert Storm. And left the Marine Corps in 1996 and spent 12 and a half years in the FBI. And shortly after 9/11, started working in Counterterrorism Division and was recruited out of the FBI at the end of 2008 to do work with the Department of Defense doing strategic analysis of the Islamic threat.
And that leads to why we're together today. You just did an awesome 8-hour seminar. So folks are kind of on the downside of that 8 hours now because it's been a long day. But oh my gosh, so much information packed into those 8 hours.
Right.
Looking back over everything you shared today, I guess, what do we do now? It seems like we do not realize how much the Muslim Brotherhood, their plans, their purposes have already been set in place. Can you kind of give my audience an idea as to what's going on?
Sure. First off, when we talk about this stuff and what we talked about in the training program today is not conjecture or professional opinion on my part. For folks that have been through the programs, we lay it out based on what the jihadis say and then what the evidence says. And as, for instance, when we talked about the bank for the Muslim Brotherhood, the North American Islamic Trust, we showed the Muslim Brotherhood strategy, and then we showed declassified FBI documents that showed that they're doing exactly what the strategy said, for instance. And the organizations that the evidence shows are a part of it, we have, obviously, like I said, declassified FBI documents and others that just back all that up. So what's going on? Well, the implications and the revelations that came out of the largest Hamas and terrorism financing trial in American history, which was from Dallas, Texas in 2008, United States versus Holy Land, reveal that the most prominent Islamic organizations in America are jihadi organizations, and currently they are prepping the battlefield here in the United States in order to wage jihad to overthrow our government, just like they say they're going to do. And that there is evidence that they have weapons training camps here. There is evidence that they are arming themselves. There is evidence that their Islamic centers are the points from which they're going to launch the jihad. And currently, our response at the U.S. government level, and in many cases at the state level, from either ignorant or well-intentioned people that don't understand, is to defend the jihadi organizations and jihadi leaders. And that goes for right here in Texas.
What do we do about that? How do we communicate to our leaders or what's happening that they're not seeing or being misinformed on?
Well, I think when we talk about what do we need to do, I think your audience needs to know that it's not just as simple as making a blanket statement and saying, you know, whatever that blanket statement is that all Muslims are bad or something like that, because as we talked about, there are people who self-identify as Muslims that don't want Sharia, that don't want to impose it on you and me. And if we don't understand this at a little deeper level, and really take this to the level we need to take it, then innocent people are going to get hurt, and that's not right either.
True.
So what we need to do is understand the threat. If somebody is Sharia adherent, they're a jihadi. That's what Sharia adherent means. And you can tell someone's Sharia adherent in a lot of ways by how they dress, how they wear their beards, as far as males go. And so just for basic, like just starting at that kind of basic level, we don't even understand that. But when we talk about leadership, I would say that, as we discussed here today, the solution is at the local level. It's at the county level. Sheriffs and pastors become the most important folks in your community, and it has to be handled county by county. As I shared today, I've had some briefings with some folks in the Pentagon, and when you lay it out from a warfighting perspective, the network here in the United States, what they're doing, how they're doing it, men in the Pentagon who are in leadership positions understand this is an insurgency in the United States. And in a counterinsurgency, the response has to be at the local level, and local police become the tip of the spear. So the first way to start is making sure local cops know that. They're the tip of the spear now. Not the U.S. military, not the FBI, but local police. Because nobody knows these local communities better than local police.
Now you mentioned churches. How do we engage with the interfaith thing that has been going on, and it's reached communities? Even our small community has an interfaith organization in it. How do we begin to awaken the pastors to what is going on?
Well, there's the broader issue, and maybe I would like to start with that.
Okay.
As I've traveled around the last 8 to 10 years around the country, and I've obviously spoken with everything from former CIA, FBI directors down to regular citizens like you and me, and everything in between, state legislators, state law enforcement, all of that. And I've spoken to a lot of different folks of a lot of different faiths around the country. And I mean, we're talking about Christians, so Protestants, evangelicals, kind of people that identify as non-denominational, Catholics, whatever it may be. And what I've found is many of them don't understand their own faith. And so when an imam comes to them and says, well, let's get down in our mosque and pray in the name of Jesus, and that's going to be our common point. Well, the Jesus they're talking about is the Jesus that comes back and casts all Christians into hell for not becoming Muslim and kill all the Jews. Now, that comes from out of the mouth of the prophet Muhammad himself. And so I have to ask, because these are senior people. These are pastors like Rick Warren and people that are internationally known. And Josh McDowell and these kind of Carl Medeiros types who've written all these books and done all these things, and they're hostile to what you and I are talking about. So it's not just, well, how do we convince them? They're hostile to the truth. So what does that say about their own heart and their own faith? And that may sound judgmental to some of your listeners, but I have to ask that question.
Right.
When you encourage evil and you support evil, but I have to ask that question. If you're a man or woman of faith, what are you supporting?
Yeah.
And if it's out of your own pride or arrogance that you don't want to face that you've made a mistake, well, all you gotta do is ask for forgiveness. But when you kind of dig in, and these are people that are hostile to people who speak like I do and speak truth into it. Jesus wasn't a sissy, and Jesus wasn't passive. And I've run into a lot of Christian leaders in speaking about this topic who believe passivity is godly. And I don't know where that comes from, but it certainly doesn't come from Jesus. So I think, first of all, you need to identify who's actually open to hearing the truth.
Good point.
Jesus said, when you hear the truth, you hear my voice. So people that are closed to the truth, I challenge them that you need to maybe look in the mirror and decide what is your real faith. Because if you can say that Islam is a religion of love and peace, when it teaches at all levels and at the highest levels of Islamic jurisprudence down to the first grade level, that anyone who's a non-Muslim is the worst of all creatures, which is why non-Muslims, Christians and Jews can't be friends with Muslims, and Muslims can't take them as friends. It's why that verse is actually taught at first grade level here in the United States. And that, fight and slay the unbelievers wherever you find them, and lie and wait for them in every stratagem of war. because Muhammad himself said, I've been commanded to fight them until they testify there's no God but God. Well, when you say it's a religion of love and, they believe in the golden rule too, that's simply not true.
No, and in fact, you were sharing today about how it is okay for them to lie, and they're even expected to lie to achieve their goals in some areas.
That's right.
Correct?
Right, because the Quran says it, Muhammad taught it, so it's part of Islamic law that it's obligatory to lie if the goal is obligatory. And jihad's obligatory until the entire world is under Sharia. That's what Islam, by the way, that's what Islam is. That's the purpose of Islam, is to put the entire world under Islamic law, because it comes from Allah, who in their mind is the ultimate lawgiver. And so a Muslim, to be a Muslim, you have to submit to Islam, which means you submit to the law of Allah, which is Sharia. And you have to make everyone on the planet. So one of the things I think we forget is Muslims who are Sharia adherent and seek to impose it on others are very sincere. They're not crazy frothing at the mouth. They're actually, if you sit down and talk to them, which I have talked to many over the years, they're very sincere about this. And if you just watch a martyrdom video of anybody that's getting ready to kill themselves in furtherance of the jihad, they're not frothing at the mouth. They're just sitting there telling you it's a command from Allah. If I do this, I will enter paradise. And this is for the glory of Allah. We just are disconnected from the truth. And I guess the last thing I'll say about this is when somebody says, well, this isn't true Islam, I just ask, where is the peaceful, mystical version of Islam taught? Because it's not taught in any Islamic school on the planet Earth, and it's not taught in any of the schools of Islamic jurisprudence anywhere.
Well, you hear them talking about that we are very peaceful, but does not that word peace only can be attained by the annihilation of all the Christians and Jews? Isn't that how they ultimately get to peace?
Well, right, and so I will say it this way, is if you look at it through the lens of Sharia law, Sharia, yes, Islam is a religion of peace, but to them, when the entire world is submitted to Sharia, either by killing those who don't convert, or for people of the book, Jews, Christians, or Zoroastrians, making them pay the non-Muslim poll tax, the jizya, submitting to Islamic law, and then once the whole world is under Sharia, then you have peace. That's their definition of peace. So technically, it is a religion of peace, just not the peace that is understood in the West.
Yeah, exactly. So when a Christian says, I agree with you, we're all for peace too, we're actually saying to our own demise. Is that correct?
That's correct. If you're talking to a jihadi, yes.
Yeah. Anything else in particular that you would like to share with my audience?
Well, I think the key is not only that this is going on, that it's going on in the United States, that this enemy is preparing the battleground right here.
And you mentioned that today, battleground.
Yeah.
I don't think we truly realize that this is genuinely a war on the home front that's about to happen.
Right, well, they say it is. We have all their documents, and as we went through today, some of these documents go back decades. Some of them are FBI reports, some of them are documents from the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamic movements that we have that specifically say everything they say is exactly what Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and others say, which is exactly what Islam teaches to first grade Muslims. So it is what it is, but more importantly, like when we talked about, has anybody seen an Islamic center being built in the United States? And quite a few people did today. And I asked, ground floor, how thick are the walls? And without hesitation, several people said, several feet thick. And I've watched them go up, and you have mosques being built in the United States with 36 to 40-inch, 42-inch ground floor walls that are rebarred reinforced, and the windows are like, 18 to 20 some inches high and 4 to 6 inches wide. What do you think that's about? Honestly, what do you think they're doing? We have, reports from federal agents that they've interdicted, cases of grenades that clearly were purchased from U.S. military personnel, and they're trying to get them back into the United States. Really, what's that about? We've captured, and we're not capturing them all, obviously. So we have these things that are happening that demonstrate to us they're prepping the battlefield. From all different levels like we talked about today. I just think it's high time we take the enemy at their word. They said in 1993, we're going to take those towers down after the first World Trade Center bombing. Did they?
did, yeah. You mentioned one other key thing I want to mention as a closing point, that the year 2016, this year,
Yes.
is significant. Would you share some on that briefly?
Sure. When people ask, why aren't we seeing more attacks in Europe and the United States? And while people say, of course, we're seeing attacks, Brussels and Paris and some of the other attacks since 9/11, and San Bernardino. But the question is, come on, not to minimize those attacks, but why aren't we seeing more of that? And the answer is, right now, the Islamic movement is focused on Muslim nations, getting Muslim nations to fully adhere to Sharia and get Muslims in line. When you hear them say, well, but they're, apologists for the jihadis will say, come on, they're killing as many Muslims as they are non-Muslims. And that's right. Because if you're a Muslim and you're not supporting the jihad, you're in violation of Sharia, and that's a capital crime. That's actually an act of apostasy. So they're killing them. Of course they will. Those Muslims in those tribal areas of Central Africa that were killed defending Christian families or non-Muslim families, yeah, they get killed. Of course, that's what the Sharia requires. But that shouldn't confuse us. This is all about Sharia. So their focus right now is on the Muslim community. Their strategy says 2016 is the year they start to make the turn. So it could be by the end of the year, it could be the first several months into 2017, but when that shift starts taking place, and once because they're still in need of fighters in those Muslim countries. Just imagine those fighters that are in Syria, Libya, and elsewhere start coming into Canada. Well, even before Canada, into France, Germany, and of course that migration, these refugees, quote unquote, that we're seeing are actually, that's the hijra of jihadis into Europe and the United States. Those are jihadis, many of them, not all of them, but many of them are. And when the flag goes up, when 0 hour hits in Europe, you're going to see not 5, 6 people, 8 people in Brussels. You're going to see 80. Just think if you saw 20. But what if you see 80 or 200 in Italy, in France, in Germany?
You're talking about jihadis that are taking action.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Just like they did in Syria, Libya, in Africa, in Asia, and elsewhere. That's what we're talking about. And imagine, right here in Texas, 50 jihadis in the same 48-hour period do, 4 or 5 different operations in and around major cities in Texas or, Florida or North Carolina or Virginia, or pick the place. I mean, and the fact that we know that they're working with Black Lives Matter and other progressive anarchist organizations, and we know that as a matter of fact because they publicly said it, and the Islamic movement, Khalila Sabra, representing the Muslim Brotherhood organizations, she said publicly last December at Muslim Brotherhood conventions here in the United States in Chicago that we need to have the revolution here that we had in the Middle East. So they're being very open about it. And what is our national security apparatus doing? Nothing.
Wow. We could talk at great length, as you have already today, but it has been 8 hours, and I know you're very tired. And I am too, to be honest. Wow, because you just start wrapping your mind around all the information that your wonderful organization has shared. And I really do appreciate not only your conference today, but taking that extra time to share with me now for my audience a little bit, just a little bit, a taste of what understanding the threat is all about. And I really do appreciate it. Look forward to catching up with you another time.
Thanks for having me, Kat.
Thank you.